What's up, everybody? My name's Dave Jackson, and this is Tales from the Backlog, a video games show where I bring in guests to talk about the games we play. And my guest today is a friend of the show and a self-flagellation enthusiast, Chris Nelson. Hey, dude.
Hey, how's it going? Good to be here.
Yeah, man. Good to have you on this show. You were on the Top 3 show before. Now welcome to Tales from the Backlog.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. This is a fun show. So I listed. Actually, I'm behind a little bit, so I guess I'm not top super number one fan.
That's all right, man. There's a lot. There's like so many hours of Tales from the Backlog. No worries. I appreciate you coming on the show. Appreciate you listening, and appreciate you as a person outside of podcast world too. So,
Thank you.
Today's game that we're going to be talking about is Blasphemous, which is a 2D metroidvania game developed by The Game Kitchen and published by Team 17 in 2019. An elevator pitch for Blasphemous, if people are listening and have never heard of it, is it's basically Castlevania, but gory as fuck Catholic imagery instead of Dracula's castle.
Yeah. Agree with that.
Yeah. But before we get into talking about Blasphemous, Chris, what else have you been playing lately, dude?
I picked up Death's Door here recently. I haven't got very far into it. No spoilers, but I think I'm past the second or third boss.
Yeah.
Before that, I was playing this, Blasphemous, obviously, and then Hades. And kind of on your recommendation, I got to get back into Death's Gambit because the podcast episode and just kind of talking with you, it's worth the second try.
Yeah, I think so. I think Death's Gambit's a real good game, especially if you're into these like difficult Metroidvania games. I think it's one of the better ones for sure. How are you liking Death's Door so far?
It's definitely it was going from Blasphemous to that. It's kind of been like a change to play style for sure, and I'm definitely finding it more difficult than I would have expected.
Yeah, it's not an easy game for sure.
Definitely not. It's I find myself rolling off of the environment a lot, trying to get away from enemies and get myself killed. And that 2.5 isometric is a little bit, I don't know, maybe it's my controllers, but I feel like I'm getting some weird, janky kind of rolls.
No, I definitely get you. Like those like those horde wave challenges, they get really intense, and like you'll be dodging around and dodge, and then suddenly you rolled off the level. That happened to me a ton of times too.
Oh, absolutely. And if you don't be aggressive at all and try just kind of rolling away, a lot of times I end up getting just like mobbed by the amount of enemies they put on.
Yeah, that's like, so by the time this episode comes out, my episode about Death's Door will be out too. So I've already recorded an episode about it, and I don't know, retroactive spoilers for something that will happen in the future, but will be in the past by the time anyone can hear this episode. We're getting real fucking timey-wimey on Tales from the Backlog today, but I don't like those wave combat challenges very much, and there's a lot of ways to get frustrated, like rolling off the edge is and some of them there's just a shitload of enemies at the same time, and you can't heal during those, and it's yeah, I like the game overall, but I don't like those combat waves.
Yeah, I get that. It's been interesting. It's kind of puzzly. I was expecting maybe a little bit more Zelda out of it, but it's been entertaining. I was been playing it in an airport because I've been doing some travel recently, so might skew the experience a little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely Zelda-ish. I think it's more Zelda than anything else. Like you're still doing those puzzles where it's light up all the torches in this room, like a Zelda game would have you doing and stuff like that. But it's definitely harder than any Zelda game I've played.
Yeah, combat-wise for sure.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, Death's Door. It's an interesting game. I thought. Did you know it's only made by like 2 people? basically. It's pretty impressive when you think about it that way. It's kind of short and it's pretty simple, and you know, you're basically doing Zelda stuff, but like the amount of polish on it I think is really nice for the small amount of people that worked on it.
Yeah, it's one of those games that actually kind of does humor decently well. And for a small team like that, it's kind of interesting because like, well, we're playing a Metroidvania, so we'd be remiss to not bring up Hollow Knight. But I mean, like Team Cherry's like a team of four, and
Yeah.
I'm this Team 17. I don't think is very big either.
The game kitchen that developed Blasphemous is I'm pretty sure they're a
Yeah,
pretty small studio too. Yeah, for sure. So cool. Um, you going back to Hades every now and then to check in?
yeah, I pick it up every once in a while because uh, at this point I have beaten Hades once,
Yeah.
and that's it. And I don't know if I'll ever get to like the true ending. And I spoiled myself on it through your podcast. I listened to how it ends because I was like, I don't see myself doing that like 16 times or whatever.
Same. Yeah. I just watched it on YouTube because
Hmm.
I I beat Hades once and then I tried like three more times and I couldn't make it back to Hades, or like I think I died in the Hades fight and I was like I'm not gonna beat this 11 times, so I just watched it on YouTube. There's no shame in that.
I said, I mean, I'm not going to really mess around with a lot of different weapons. I kind of found the one that I liked, and if that was going to be the one I was going to beat Hades with. I wasn't going to really try messing around with anything else.
Yeah, for sure. Totally get that. Cool. Well, what do you say we get into Blasphemous?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so getting into talking about Blasphemous, which is our focus for today, Blasphemous has some things that can be spoiled, including a story, but also like I think that the bosses in Blasphemous are something that people should like see for themselves before you hear them, you know, kind of go into those unspoiled. And the story in Blasphemous, just like I've said in every game like this, that doles out its story very sparsely. I said this in the Death's Gambit episode, Hollow Knight, the Dark Souls episode. I don't follow the story in Blasphemous very well, but we will save like direct story talk until after the spoiler wall. So if you haven't played, no worries. Just be on the lookout for that spoiler wall coming up kind of in the middle of this show. So let's get into Blasphemous. And we always begin the show with our kind of histories with the game, what got us interested in playing Blasphemous, and the guest always goes first. So, Chris, what brought you to Blasphemous?
I had like seen it around on like the Switch store and like just kind of scrolling through looking for like kind of 2D Metroidvania style stuff, and I'd landed on it a few times and never picked it up. And then actually, when you reached out and said you want to be on a Tales episode, I said, "Well, which one? Are, what should we play?" And we kind of threw some stuff around, and you threw Blasphemous out, and it was kind of like that's definitely one that I haven't played, but I'd like to play it. So that was kind of where I landed with my history on it, and I mean, I'm definitely glad that I played it. So
Yeah, and like I think when we were talking about games to play, I think we talked about a couple of Metroidvanias. So, like this being a Metroidvania, what's your kind of history with that genre in general?
I think the more and more, and maybe it's just because I play a lot exclusively on my Switch nowadays, it's kind of becoming my favorite genre, like probably of all time. I remember playing like Super Metroid on a Super Nintendo as a kid and like renting it from like a video store, not even a like Blockbuster, like just some mom and pop video store. And
Mm-hmm.
renting that game over and over again was kind of pointless because I played the first like 2 hours over and over again.
Yeah.
And then I played a few on and off. I beat Metroid Dread here recently. I played Fusion back on I think it was at Game Boy Advanced.
Yep.
Um, Castlevania stuff all the way back from like the original Nintendo, like Simon's Quest,
Mm-hmm.
which was like Castlevania 2. Um, Started to get into some of the like handheld, the again Game Boy Advance Castlevanias, those
Mm-hmm.
kind of after Symphony of the Night kind of stuff that definitely
Yeah.
like redefined the genre. I think that was kind of what set in stone the Metroidvania was that Symphony of the Night.
Mm-hmm.
So mostly mostly those ones. I have played like Ori, and there was one I was trying to think of the other day that I didn't really realize while I was playing it. It was a Metroidvania. I was playing it on the like Xbox 360 maybe, and you're this little rabbit character with a sword. I
Hmm.
think very cartoony, and
Okay.
I can't remember the name of it, but
Yeah, it's not ringing any bells for me either.
yeah, but it had very like looking back, it definitely had some like Metroidvania elements like movement and combat upgrades, stuff like that. So
Okay. Cool. And we mentioned, we mentioned Hollow Knight earlier, and we mentioned like Death's Gambit. So there's definitely a draw there. I'm with you. Like, I don't know. I play lots of different like styles of games, but like a good Metroidvania is always going to be like near the top of my favorites. And so like I've played through Blasphemous twice, and like the reason I wanted to play this was number one, like I if people say there's a good Metroidvania, I probably will try it at some point. So like there's that. And I saw the artwork in Blasphemous, and I was like, "Oh, that's metal as fuck. Like I should move that up the top of the wish list." And there's some things that connect this with like Dark Souls, and like that kind of Souls like Metroidvania thing is like deeper into my interests. And we'll talk about this in the episode, like how soulsy this actually is. It's not super souls like, but there are things that they've maybe been inspired from like the Souls games. And so like all of those things together, if there's like, oh, this game is Souls like and it's a Metroidvania and it's got metal as fuck like graphics and artwork, then like I'm in. What's weird though is there's a demo for this game you can download on the Switch shop, and I assume other storefronts too. And I played the demo and I hated it. And I didn't buy the actual game until like over a year later. I think it got like a big update that added a bunch of quality of life stuff, like a fast travel system and stuff like that, which I don't believe were in the original build of the game. So when that came out and I heard other people talking about how good it was, I was like, okay, I'll give it another shot. And it just takes some time to get into how kind of slow, and this is like the slowest Metroidvania game I think I've ever played. Um, yeah,
totally,
so,
definitely a more strategic kind of combat.
right. So it just took me a while to get into it. And for people listening, if you're worried, if you're worried or wondering how long this game is, it took me 14 hours my first time to beat it with 80 to 90% completion, and 12 hours when I replayed it with slightly less percent completion. I started to do some of the optional stuff, and I realized I wasn't really into it. But the main game was still really fun on my replay. So that's my play time.
Yeah, I was probably closer to 20 because I did think I wanted to get the new DLCs like ending, and there's a lot of stuff in that that's like additional quests and some like backtracking kind of stuff that you have to do,
Mm-hmm.
and weird stuff that I don't know, kind of spoilery. We might probably talk about it a little
Yeah.
later, but so it was about 20 or so for me.
Yeah. Right on. All right, so let's get into talking about Blasphemous and the mechanics of it. What else kind of makes it stand out? And we're going to start out with like the kind of story setup. And like I said before, I'm not super huge on picking up story in games like this, but there is a very interesting setup for it. So Blasphemous is set in. Is it Systodia or Custodia? Because it's spelled with a V in the first syllable of the word. I thought it
See, I
was
was,
Systodia
yeah,
or something
I
like that.
I guess I've been doing it with a like just replacing the V with a U, but then it
Yeah,
kind of has a weird name like Custodia, like custodian. I don't know.
yeah.
Cystonia sounds better.
It's spelled CVSTODIA.
Hmm.
So your guess is as good as mine. That's not how languages work. So, um, uh, Cystodia, I'm going to keep saying Cystodia, is a land of religion, highly influenced by Roman Catholicism, the iconography and Spanish culture, uh, particularly that of the Andalusia region, which is where the game developer is from. They're from Spain. This is a Spanish game development studio. So this game just wears all of those influences, both from religion and culture, on its sleeve. Before we get into talking about like the game and stuff, I do want to say if you are not averse to subtitles and like reading subtitles, I highly recommend playing this game with the Spanish voice acting. Um, it's just first of all, it's set in a very Spanish inspired, setting, so it makes sense that way. And I like to play games that way if it's not, too intrusive, or if it doesn't have really annoying dialogue. Um, or like really annoying voice acting, what I mean. But in this game, the Spanish voice acting it's incredible. It's really, really good. And like I don't speak enough Spanish to like understand it, but I read subtitles even when I do stuff in English, so it's not a big deal for me.
Yeah, you mentioned that to me, and I didn't do my homework on that, so I didn't listen to it in the Spanish subtitling. But I found some weird. I was watching some YouTube videos, and one that particularly stuck out to me was one character's voice actor. They must have changed it at some update because the first one sounds very like kawaii anime, like just bad. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
the update, she's her voice acting is a lot more in sync with like the game and how you would expect everyone else to speak.
Right. Everyone else has this very serious, very melancholy voice acting, and then to have like basically like a Genshin Impact character would be
Yeah,
really would be really
yeah,
bizarre. So, um the land of Systodia is dominated by this force called the Miracle, and you'll keep hearing about this as you play. And this kind of manifests itself in like good ways for people, but also horrible and often like super cruel ways. So some characters get blessed by this, and many characters have been cursed in horrible ways by the Miracle, transforming them into these like super twisted creatures.
yeah. It's a really cool kind of like I don't even know the word for it. Like set up for why there's monsters in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like this whole idea of the miracle and um, these like the high wills, which is like God punishing people and them asking to be punished, which I think is a very Catholic thing.
Yeah.
And there's like this the first miracle, kind of that guy becomes part of like their religion, and that just kind of like it sets up a cool backstory for like why the monsters are there, which is like I think kind of wears a little bit of its Dark Souls on its sleeve there a little bit. Like
Mm.
they're just regular people that are done got turned into bad guys.
Yeah, there's a curse afoot, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why the monsters are there basically. Yeah, so this is actually hitting two of my like huge weak spots in like my knowledge base. Number one, picking up on story in games that don't have cutscenes telling you the story, but also I don't know shit about Catholicism or religion in general at this point in my life. Like whatever I learned in Sunday school when I was a kid is it's all gone now, basically. So like this is just like extreme religious flavor for me, and I don't, I understand like the concept of, penitence and stuff like that. I understand what that means, but like if you are actually Catholic, you'll probably pick up a whole hell of a lot more from this game than I do.
Yeah, and just kind of the way that they speak too is very like out of the Bible, like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of floral phrasing and
Yeah.
sentences go on for god awful lengths to get like some point across. And again, even like going through some of the cutscenes that are supposed to kind of be explaining the story, they just use so many like penance and all these different words for like punishing and different allegories for stuff. I think in the Catholic religion that yeah, I'm like you. If church would have been this metal, I might have gone to it
Yeah,
more.
for
But
sure. Like if I was 9 years old going to Sunday school and they like introduced the game Blasphemous and they're like, "Hey, this is what this shit's all about," I would have been like, "Oh, okay,
Lord,
maybe I'll get into this."
you got
um,
one.
in Blasphemous, your main character is called the penitent one, and in my game, he's called penitente. As I was playing with the Spanish dialogue, so your character you wake up in this pile of corpses that look exactly like you, which is a great way for any game to start. Um, and you really don't have much direction for a while. You just kind of wake up and it's a video game, so you run to the right and you start killing stuff, and you'll get some exposition as we go on. But like that's all you get at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of went back and definitely did some like deep dives into like YouTube stuff, and apparently there was a comic book or something that was done beforehand.
Dude, I'm sure that a graphic novel of this would be like really entertaining to at
Hmm.
least see what it looks like.
Yeah, and I think they kind of go into what the penitent one is, and like his whole vow of silence and all that kind of
Yeah.
very Catholic imagery there.
Yeah, you like so the penitent, this isn't like super spoiler, like this isn't actually like told to you in any direct way in the game. You can kind of figure this out, but like the penitent one is part of this brotherhood who's rebelling against the miracle, and
Yeah,
they've all been wiped out, except for the penitent one who's taken on a vow of silence, as you said. The game begins with this cutscene where this woman basically stabs herself through the heart with this sword. You go and you pull the sword out. You kill the first boss. You take off your big cone helmet and you fill it with the boss's blood, and then you put it back down on your head, and the blood is like rushing out from the bottom of it. It's if I mean, and at that point, if you're not in on like the visuals and like the theming of this game, like I don't know what to tell you after that cutscene, because that cutscene was the point where I was like, oh, okay, this game's weird as fuck. I'm in for this.
and that took me too long to realize kind of what the idea was there, like because you get your health potions or whatever are supposed to be flasks of blood, and he smashes them on his head every time he heals. I'm like, oh,
They're
so like
they're
he's like,
they're flasks of bile, actually, which
oh
is
yeah,
even cooler than blood.
yeah.
And yeah,
So
to heal, he takes these flasks and just smashes them into his face.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's like I said, it's just kind of heavy metal all around.
Yeah. So like talking about the visuals, we'll just continue with like talking about the pixel art in this game, which is like legit some of the best, most creative pixel art I've ever seen in a game. It's incredible in this game.
Yeah,
Um,
it's top notch. Like some of the best stuff I've seen. Like definitely pulling from like Castlevania esque, but like ramped up for sure. Like I rarely did I like look at a character like an enemy or anything and be like, what's that supposed to be? Like
Yeah.
they got their point across perfectly just about every time.
And they all have the enemies all have such distinct designs. Like it's not like a well, there are enemies that you could relate to, like the Castlevania, like Medusa heads that fly out or something like that. But it's definitely not a game where you're just fighting dudes with swords all the time. Like the enemy designs are super creative. They all have like pretty unique move sets that you have to memorize, like how this enemy attacks and stuff like that. But you know, the pixel art, especially for like the bosses and the main NPCs that you meet, like so this game does this thing that a lot of like artwork would do, where like if someone is really important, they make them much bigger than you, and so like um everyone who's designed that way, bosses and NPCs that are designed that way, the pixel art and just the imagination behind it is incredible.
Yeah, like because like the first boss you run into is like giant, and you're kind of just like, okay, that's like video game, right? Like
Right,
boss
right.
much bigger than me. But then
Yeah.
like the one of the first NPCs you run into is like on his knees, still taller than you.
Yeah.
Is it Dio Gracias?
Yeah, Deo
I think his name
Gracias.
is,
Yeah.
and he's like kind of like your guide, I guess,
Yeah, he's the one
for the
who's
game.
giving you little like clues about what you need to do next and stuff, and he'll show up after
Mhm.
you beat a boss, and he's got like his arms bound
Yeah,
and stuff like that, and like there's no character design that is not just maximum, suffering like illustrated basically.
yeah, and I'm sure if I knew more about like religious iconography, there would be some like even in like the enemies too. Like there's
Oh
got to
yeah.
be some background that I'm just unaware of. Like the one that comes to mind is like a creature that's like split down the middle with like
Mhm.
a saw, and he like throws the saw at you. I gotta imagine that's like maybe some kind of like this is what this type of sinner goes to hell, and they get
Yeah.
cut in half by a saw or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't know, these the enemy designs, the NPC designs, especially the big bosses, they really have to be seen to be believed that someone like came up with this and drew it in pixel art and animated the way that it is. It's pretty crazy. And it's frankly, it's I think it's the thing that stands out the most in Blasphemous is just all of these designs and like the vistas in the background too, like they're really really beautiful. Like at when this
Yeah,
game wants to be, it's a beautiful game.
and they do some cool stuff with like um one that comes to mind is when you're on the rooftops and you're running across to I think the prison or something, and
Hmm.
it backlights or forelights. I don't know how the what the term is, but the characters in the foreground are all in black and shadow, and
Right.
then the Custodia, whatever we're calling it, is in the
Yeah, exactly.
background, and it's like very bright. So it's just a very cool like cinematic kind of thing that I kind of just popped out of nowhere a little bit
Yeah.
to me. I was like, oh well, shit, these guys know art.
Yeah, exactly. I took a lot of screenshots in this game, and I'm not like a I don't take screenshots in every game I play. I'll just say that. And I took a ton of screenshots in Blasphemous, and I'm going to share some on the Tales from the Backlog social media pages because I'll try not to spoil stuff, but like just to give people an idea of just how beautiful this game actually is. So,
Yeah, and they kind
um,
of do in the cutscenes that like Ren and Stimpy thing or SpongeBob where they like get real close to like characters' faces and you can like see every crinkle in their like
mhm,
mouth and eyes, and so
yeah,
like and that's done in that pixel art still too. So it's like they paid really close attention. I think they put a lot of love into how at least specifically how these characters looked and the message they wanted to get across.
right, exactly, yeah, and like oh, we normally don't spend this much time talking about the way games look on this show, but I mean this game deserves that attention for sure. Um, Kind of tying in with visuals, the other half of like creating in atmosphere and tone is the music in Blasphemous, which I really like, and it's very laid back. Um, the tracks that I'm specifically thinking about that I really like are like these just kind of strumming acoustic guitar pieces in the first several levels that you go through. And these are tracks that I would like put on while I'm like cleaning my house or something like that. They're very easy listening. You know, video game music is easy listening almost by default because it can't distract you from what you're actually doing in the game. So it's kind of designed to be on in the background. Um, but I really love those acoustic guitar tracks. There were some tracks that like I forget what the level is called, but um, the one with all the toxic mist that you're jumping from platform to platform, that sounded like a Mario like underground song to me. Yeah, the the soundtrack doesn't have a ton of like super memorable songs, but I do just love that like easy strumming, like acoustic guitar in a lot of the level backgrounds.
And that's like nothing like jumped out at me like a song that I'm gonna remember for the rest of my life. But I feel like a lot of that um, was because, like I said, I think maybe the music was kind of pushed to the background because of the visuals a little bit, and they just
Mm-hmm.
wanted something like lo-fi anime beats to study to. And but like
Lo-fi
I
Catholic
remember
beats to study too, which is
the one I do recall that stuck out to me was for a weird reason as a library level
hmm
sounded like a Kingdom Hearts song. I think it was Hollow Bastion, which
okay.
makes me a huge dork for remembering that it sounded like a Kingdom Hearts song, and b I don't know. It just like you said, the sewer sounded like Mario, and that sounded like it seems like they kind of maybe drew a lot of inspiration from other stuff, and
hmm
like your sewer levels got to have this sound, and your library levels got to have this sound. Kind
hmm
of, it didn't nothing seemed too. They weren't. I don't think they were like reaching for anything too off the wall.
Yeah, it's a lot of tracks that really just set like a tone in the environment that you're in. It's not like these big Castlevania tracks, and it's
Yeah.
not it, but it doesn't go so far as like Dark Souls where there's no music. It is laid back, but it is there, and it does contribute to the vibe in the levels. So,
Yeah, you're not getting that like bloody tears or any of those
mhm,
Castlevania songs that like hit really hard, even though they
yeah.
were like just little MIDI tunes.
hmm And I'll put in, of course, as I always do, there will be blasphemous music thrown in throughout this episode, so you'll get an idea of what we're talking about with the kind of just how it's used to set tone. So cool. Well, let's listen to a little bit of that blasphemous music, and we are going to talk about the kind of main thing you're doing in blasphemous, which is fighting when we come back. All right, and we're back talking about the combat in Blasphemous. So, one kind of area where this game receives criticism, as all difficult games do, I feel like, is with its difficulty. So, Chris, how did you feel about like the difficulty level of Blasphemous?
It definitely took me by I was like I think I was into like the third or fourth boss, which is like when you're starting to get into like the visages or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
before I felt like I had really like grabbed on to how the mechanics were supposed to work. Because I fought like I guess technically the like second or some. I mean the bosses can kind of be played in just about any order a little bit, but there was a
Those
boss
first
that
three,
had
yeah.
yeah. the boss that had like a kind of like a deer head, and
Mm-hmm.
it taught me everything. It was like the primer for knowing how to like parry and then like counterattack um, for bosses more than like for like regular enemies. And it took me that like 5, 6 tries like to get past that. But as I progressed and like the you get minor upgrades to the sword and you kind of learn, I put it in quotes like combos, but
Mm-hmm.
that help out with just kind of outputting damage. And it definitely has um, an emphasis on parrying over dodging,
Yeah.
which I guess kind of took me for a little bit of a loop the first couple bosses.
Yeah, so I think that's like your main thing, that when you're learning how to play Blasphemous, you got to get a handle on your defense first, because a lot of enemies, you could kill them in like one full combo, but they're going to hit you before you get a full combo in. So it's like there's not a whole lot of different enemies in each level. Like each level will maybe give you like four kinds of enemies to learn. And so you got to learn what they do, but you also have to learn how to block and parry and counter. So you can block basically everything in this game. Um, there are maybe some projectiles that you can't block, but there are some that you can. Um, the main thing is figuring out the block timing, um, relying on blocking more than dodging. Like you said, like you do have like a slide dodge that you can use, but you can just block everything, and if you hit that timing right, you'll get a counterattack window that does like much more damage than if you just blocked regularly and then attacked with your normal combo. So that's like your main point of emphasis when you're learning, is learn how to block, learn how to block with the right timing to get that parry. And like the window for that perfect parry is not very it's not very tight, it's not very hard. You just have to practice a few times.
No, and I got like one of the like the sword that he has, the Maya Culpa has like
Mhm.
cores. It's just like some upgrade type item, but it like can change kind of how the weapon works. And there's one that made like parrying like the window that you parry a little bit longer. So if you
Right.
didn't hit that perfect block, you would still get more time to kind of not have to be as exact.
Mhm.
And pretty much once I put that one in, I never experimented with any other ones because
Yeah. Same. So like you mentioned before, you do kind of have attack combos in this game. This isn't a game like Castlevania where you just swing the sword the exact same way four times in a row. You actually have a combo that ends with a big like spinning, jumping finisher move that does a lot more damage than the first strike in the combo does. But you have to really set yourself up in a way where you can actually get that full combo in before an enemy will attack. So it's a nice. I think the combat is simple in Blasphemous, but I think it's pretty satisfying when you pull off those parries. When you get to the end of those big combos, you have some magic attacks too. And at the beginning of the game, they'll give you like a uh, it's like you're throwing a blood boomerang, which is metal as fuck. Um,
Mhm.
that uses your magic meter, and then you'll pick up lots of other magic spells throughout the game, and those are kind of limited use. You regain your magic by attacking stuff or by doing execution moves, which sometimes at the end of a combo, an enemy will kind of stand there like the end of a Mortal Kombat fight, and you go over and press X, and you'll do this extremely graphic and extremely cool execution move that'll refill your magic a lot. And I kind of only used magic as like a okay, this boss is going to be here for a few seconds. I'll pull off this huge magic spell, get a ton of damage in. But like you can only do that maybe once or twice per boss fight.
Yeah, and like the whole I guess you'd call it a stun, was a little. It seemed some character or some enemies I could like do a parry, and then I knew that was going to be a stun. But other ones, it was like a different set of details, or you have to attack in a certain way to get them to stun.
Yeah. I
So
never fully got like to the point where I could predict when that was going to happen. It was just like, an execution. Okay, go get that. But I could never be like, okay, here's how to do an execution or like here to set one up. It's just
yeah,
kind of a nice surprise when it did happen.
yeah, the only one that I ever really fully understood was like the characters with the big like bronze bull heads. If you did your like dash move, dash attack through them, it usually stunned them.
Okay.
And that's
Gotcha.
like the only one. And it wasn't 100% of the time either.
Right.
So that's about the only one I figured out.
Yep.
And then
Same.
there's like a there's a there's something that they throw a tutorial at you at the beginning of the game that I didn't really pick up until the end, and I never fully mastered it. It's like a and it's not anything that you like have to earn through upgrades. It's just when you jump in the air and you like hit your you have to hit your attack and then hold down an attack, and you
Yeah.
kind of like juggle yourself in the air.
Yeah. So, okay. So there's two things. There's a plunging attack, like, Link in Super Smash Brothers or Zelda 2
Hmm.
or something like that. You can do a plunging attack. And I use that a lot because a lot of
Yeah.
times you're jumping down up where enemies are on a floor lower than you. So I use that plunging attack a lot. The other one is like, are you talking about like the platforming thing where you can hit these like lanterns and kind of like speed boost your way through the air?
Yeah, and you can do that on enemies as well.
It's really hard. And
Yes,
like,
very, very hard.
there's it's so finicky that it's not like Hollow Knight where you're pogoing and it's very intuitive about how it works. Like there's a couple sections where you need to do it to get to a ledge where an item is, and I kind of tried a few times and succeeded, on a couple of them, but I never fully like understood why I succeeded and why I failed, so
Yeah,
I never like put that into my like, platforming vocabulary.
definitely not. And I think I maybe by the time I was fighting probably like the last boss,
Mhm.
and just kind of try to avoid spoilers there, but he's above you more or less,
Yeah.
and you can kind of do that float move and get a little bit more like time because it's harder to get up to him. So if you can kind of suspend yourself in the air a little bit, you'll get a couple more hits.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess if I had been like really confident in that or even like thinking about that as an option, I would have used it in that final fight, but I didn't really. So, let's
Yeah.
talk about the bosses while we're on the subject. We already talked about the designs and the pixel art. They are uh, one of two things. They are either gruesome as fuck or they're weird as fuck or they're both. And some of them are, some of them are both. And I don't want to say anything more because I don't want to spoil what these look like. If you're listening to this and you haven't played Blasphemous and it sounds like you might like it, um, these boss designs, like whenever you see one, you're just like, oh, what the fuck is that thing? Like
Yeah,
just incredible imagination here.
definitely, and like somewhat tragic sometimes. Like
Oh yeah,
you're
yeah,
like you're kind of like okay, and like in a little bit of the backstory, you're kind of getting like that these are people or things that were affected by this like miracle.
the miracle,
So
right?
so it's like, well, they're kind of just suffering too, and you're just gonna go kick their ass for funsies.
Well,
But
I there's lots of times in video games where someone is clearly having a bad time I'm in a position, or at least in my head canon, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take care of you and put an end to all this because you're clearly not enjoying the way life is right now, which definitely goes for some of these bosses. um,
yeah,
I think the variety as far as like gameplay with the bosses is really good. Some of them are duels with like characters your size, or like, dudes with swords basically, or dudes with, melee weapons, or ladies with melee weapons. Some of them are big monsters like we talked about before, like you would expect in a Castlevania or a 2D Souls like game. Some of them are straight up like, this is a Castlevania boss, room full of projectiles and stuff like that. The variety, I want to say there's maybe 10 bosses in the game, and the variety of them is really good. I really enjoyed. Let me think. Yeah, I think the first boss you talked about, that's just like a big goat dude, um,
Mhm.
or no, like the tutorial boss, which is just like a big, you know, monster thing.
Yeah.
Pretty standard. There's another one that's just like a big goat looking dude who looks cool, but it's not a very interesting fight. The rest of them I think are really, really cool. And it's cool how like you rarely fight two bosses that feel like, hey, this is like the other one.
Yeah, and like you kind of like you mentioned, like a lot of them wear their Castlevania on the sleeve, like big room filling, bullet hell kind of uh, monsters. You don't really feel like you're interacting with them, more like you're interacting with the stage.
Hmm.
And then you've got the real like personal, like you're mano a mano with this, uh, like I said, like a duel. And I think I found those ones more interesting than the big monster mans. I found most of the ones that I recall, like when I was like going through a list to get kind of bosses in my head for this game. Most of the ones that I bring up are those kind of smaller dual
Hmm.
fights.
Those ones definitely, I think all the bosses are like well made from a, development standpoint. Like the hitboxes all feel pretty fair. Um, Even those big like bullet hell ones, like there are Castlevania bosses where like the room is legitimately full of shit, and Metroid too, where you just can't avoid the stuff that's on the screen. It's not like that in Blasphemous. There's always a safe place, even in those more bullet hell inspired bosses. Um,
A
and
lot
then
of
yeah.
times, projectiles can be like hit back
Hmm.
at like bosses and stuff. So it's like you got to kind of learn the difference between the one you got to jump and the one that you can hit. But it
Yeah.
never feels unfair. Like,
Right.
well, how was I supposed to know that?
Yeah.
They give you a little bit of a just maybe, and maybe this is from a experienced uh, gameplay or video game player that you
Hmm.
just kind of you can catch that like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do here.
Yeah, and it's really fair, and I think a lot of the bosses are really intuitive, about like what you're supposed to do. And I think on my replay there was one boss that took me over 10 tries, and on my first play, and then on my replay, I don't think any of the bosses took me more than 3 or 4 tries, and I first tried about half of them. So I don't think these bosses are like a huge difficulty spike from just the regular enemies in the game. Um, yeah, they feel pretty good. There's a couple that I'm thinking of that are definitely hard, but like when I replayed it, I remembered how to beat them.
Hmm.
So it wasn't so bad.
Yeah, like I said, I think by like third or fourth boss, I was taking most of them out in first try or second try, and a lot of my second tries were like just some dumb mistake where I fell off the level because there's a couple that kind of have like options like that where you can like it's like a scrolling level and you fell
Hmm.
off and you messed up there, or you get caught in an area like with like kind of that bullet hell thing where, or like a full AOE kind of room attack, and you're just always in the wrong spot, so you get hit and then bounced and then hit and then bounced, and then you're like, oh well, crap.
Yeah,
That's because I was in the wrong space at the wrong time, and then it just cascaded until I was dead.
yeah. Should mention that this game does have knockback like a Castlevania game does. However, in most cases, because this game also has instant death pit spike pits.
Yeah.
In most cases, that knockback will not knock you off of a ledge. It will knock you to the edge of the ledge, even if you're really close to it. And so that's a really nice. Like we'll talk about the spike pits when we talk about the platforming and stuff. But that is a nice kind of thing where the developers are saying like, if you miss a jump and you fall in the spike pit, you die. But if you get, tagged by something, it's most of the time it's not going to knock you off that ledge into it. That's just a nice little thing. So, I mentioned before this game has some similarities with Souls likes, 2D Souls likes. And like a lot of these things are, some of these things are not, specific to Souls likes, but, this game does kind of have a reputation as being a little bit soulsy in the combat. So the things that I wrote down here are that the enemies, basically all of the enemies have very big windups, or they only have a couple of moves. And so you have to learn what each enemy does, and once you do, the enemies in the levels are probably not going to kill you a whole lot once you learn what they do.
Mhm.
Um, this is the kind of difficulty that I like, where like, this enemy, the first time I saw it, really fucked me up, but I learned what it does. Now I can just block that attack. I know that attack is coming, and I'll never die to that enemy again once I figure out what it's doing.
Yeah, and like you said, that's very. It kind of wears its souls like a little bit there in that if you play dumb on a basic level enemy, you could end up getting yourself killed just being
Yeah,
like trying to move too fast or not following kind of the I don't know the strategy that they've told you works.
yeah.
Um,
The basic enemies are probably not going to kill you, but they will take away your health, and it's like a super precious resource with the way that the health system works in Blasphemous. So this is actually very similar to Dark Souls, where you have your checkpoints that you rest at, and you heal by using those bile flasks. Like we said, the penitent one literally smashes them into his face. These glass bottles, um, and you have a limited number of heals, and there is really no way to heal without using those flasks. So like it's like the Estus flask basically, where if you have 4 of them, they're saying, okay, you can, you know, make 4 mistakes as you're going through, and then you can heal with these things. The interesting thing though with the bile flasks is that you have an option through an NPC in the game to sacrifice one flask to make all of the other ones stronger. And so I think throughout the game you'll find maybe 8 or 9 bile flasks, something like that. And you can choose to sacrifice, I think, 4 of them, maybe 5, maybe 3, something like that. So you kind of can customize, like, do I want to be able to heal, 8 times and have it be like a, kind of a weak heal, but, top myself off, that kind of thing? Or do I want to sacrifice these and be only able to heal 4 or 5 times, but it's a really strong heal? And I kind of like this, system. I think it's like, number one, there's a quest with that NPC to reinforce the flasks and sacrifice them. So I think the game is telling you should do that. And also, like, a lot of the bosses don't give you a ton of opportunities to heal. So like having 9 healing chances is not super helpful, as opposed to having 5, but they're really strong. So I think it's kind of a no-brainer to do it, but I do like that the choice is there.
yeah, it's nice that like you could kind of go to play style. Like, do you want to constantly be checking on your health, or do you want to just kind of maybe be able to bust through a couple flasks when you're like, oh, I'm like right at the end here,
Yeah.
or do you want to kind of strategize when you're gonna heal? Like, if I can make it through this set of attacks, I can tank it a little bit and then get my
Mm-hmm.
heal, and then uh, move on with like get myself positioned for the next kind of volley of attacks that the specifically kind of talking more like about the bosses than anything else.
Right. And another thing about that is like a lot of times if you don't time it correctly, if you choose the right, if you choose the wrong time to heal, you'll heal, but you'll get hit while you're healing, and so like it can negate your heal. So having a really strong healing flask will maybe you'll get hit by something, but you'll still end up healing more than you lose during that attack. So again, I think it is really really useful to do that sacrificing. Plus, the NPC quest is fucking bizarre, and you got to see it.
Yeah, no spoilers on that one, but it is friggin'
Yeah,
weird.
but we'll just say like you may be presented with that choice of saying like sacrifice one of your healing charges, and you may think like, oh, that doesn't sound good, but I think you should for all of the reasons we just talked about.
And there's like an item cost and a money cost, which I guess we haven't really talked much about the
Right.
tier system. But I mean, it's like you said, souls or
But it's different from the Dark Souls way because you don't lose your currency
yeah,
when you die in Blasphemous, which is really, again, instant death pit spikes are something that I'm not a huge fan of, but you don't lose your currency in this game like you like you might, in another game like this. So,
yeah, your souls and your Hollow Knights and
right,
stuff like
exactly.
that.
The other thing that I wrote down that, ties in with the healing system and also the kind of Souls like nature, it's a very light Souls like in Blasphemous, but when you rest at checkpoints, you refill all of your bile flasks, but all of the enemies respawn. So this is not like a Castlevania where you kill all the enemies, you leave the screen, then you go back and the enemies are back. They stay dead in Blasphemous until you rest, and then they respawn. So, um, I think I've seen a challenge on YouTube, like a speed run challenge to kill all the enemies in the entire game to basically despawn the whole game.
Yeah,
Sounds that's sicko stuff, but it's
yeah,
interesting, and that is the way that it works. So
yeah.
another kind of Souls parallel thing in Blasphemous.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, but what Blasphemous really is at its heart is it is a Metroidvania, and it's much more on the Vania side than the Metroid side. I think Metroids to me are really about like movement stuff, especially as you get uh, new abilities that give you, speed boost and shine spark and, double jump and grapple beams and all that. That's Metroid stuff. This is much more Castlevania, like, you don't really get movement upgrades in this game. You pick up items that act as kind of Metroidvania upgrades. So, like, there's an item that causes these invisible platforms to appear. And if you have that item equipped, then you can go into this area that was blocked off before. There's an item that lets you walk in toxic mist, stuff like that. But this isn't the like double jump, shine spark, infinite jump like some Metroidvanias will give you. It's definitely not like that. So it's much more Castlevania, I think, even though Castlevania does give you double jumps and stuff like that.
Yeah, I yeah, fully agree with that. Like, because the movement upgrades don't like integrate into combat even like
Yeah.
really at all. Like a lot of your more modern Metroidvanias do. Like I keep bringing up Hollow Knight, but like that like took like combat and platforming to like they mix so well together.
Hmm.
Like it's like almost like I think you guys even mentioned it in your Hollow Knight episode. Like all of a sudden, Hollow Knight can become a freaking Super Meat Boy level, and you're
Yeah.
not gonna run into that at all. In the well, there is some instances of it we'll talk about later that
Hmm.
totally suck. But
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of my like things for like my favorite Metroidvanias will do that, where you get these movement upgrades and they're not just, or you get your Metroidvania upgrades and they're not just like keys to open a door that was locked before. they got to be useful in combat too to really hit that high level. And the Blasphemous upgrades don't really do that. They're more for like revisiting areas to get treasure. Basically, that's really all they're for.
Yeah, it does feel just like a key, basically.
Yeah. But as the Metroidvanias do, Blasphemous has a big map that is very interconnected. And I think the interconnection is like really, really good in this game. Each area is connected to like at least two other areas, either by fast travel points or like just straight up doors or elevators. And
Mhm.
this is a, if I'm remembering the map right, it's a very like it's basically a square. And so there's a lot of like verticality to the map too, but they use these elevators to connect the points really, really well. And so there are points where you have to backtrack from like one corner of the map to the other, but it's not fun, I don't think. Like, movement in Hollow Knight or in Metroid Dread is really fun. It doesn't feel that way in Blasphemous. Like we said before, you move really slow, but they do help out a lot with those fast travel points and those elevators. So it doesn't take you forever to get to a point unless you're going to some really obscure portion of the map.
Yeah, and like you say with like Hollow Knight and and Dread specifically, like running around in Dread felt awesome.
Hmm.
But like dashing honestly didn't even feel like you were moving that much faster in Blasphemous. And like there's like some items that can like increase your general run speed, I think, and also like decrease the amount of dash that you have. But like they don't feel like they integrate into bosses that well, so I'd never really wore them.
Hmm.
Like so, it's like unless it can like be have multiple uses, it just sucks to be like constant. Like, well, I got to get to the other side of the map. Let me put on my running gear, and
Yeah,
then if I run into a boss, oh crap! I get. And you can only change some of that stuff out at
at
checkpoints.
checkpoints,
So
right. Yeah, it's not really a game where like the Hollow Knight. This has a similar thing to Hollow Knight where you have a rosary rope, and you can equip different rosary beads that give you different effects, similar to the the Hollow Knight badge or charm system. But like you said, like in Hollow Knight, I had my exploring build with the badges or the charms, and then I had my boss fight build basically. And in this game, I kind of just kept the same stuff equipped the whole game, unless I found like a better version of one I already had equipped.
yeah, especially with the rosary there, because there was definitely like at least 4 items that were just does like minorly protects and majorly
Yeah,
protects and
exactly. Yep.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, and
So
it's like okay, this boss I'm fighting has a bunch of lightning attacks. Let me throw on the lightning defense rosaries and stuff like that. But it's definitely not the it's not a game where you're going to create these like really crazy builds. I'm sure that there's some that can like synergize with magic and like if you want to use the different magic spells. I always just use the magic spell that is like kind of, you know, beams coming down from the sky that kind of fill up the screen. And that was always my like, oh shit, a lot of enemies on screen right now. Let me just hit that. And I just kept that equipped for the entire game.
been messing around with 1 or 2 other ones really, and one of them was uh, like a not quite Bloodborne, but like you if you hit an enemy, you get some of your HP back. But definitely not like in Bloodborne where you got to do it fast. But it's
Hmm.
just like on a timer. Like you get 30 seconds, and if you pop your spell right before you're not gonna get, you're gonna get a combo. You kind of get a. It's definitely not nearly as much as like a flask, but you get a little bit of health back.
Yeah, could be helpful for sure.
I don't know if I used it very effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, I just I didn't really poke around with many of the spells that much because that lightning spell or that like beams from heaven spell, whatever it's called, it's really powerful. And I
Hmm.
just kept it equipped as like a panic button type thing most of the time.
Yeah, and it's like a room, like damn near full room level. So even in like boss fights where you're like kind of stuck in a situation, you
Mm-hmm.
kind of hit your oh shit button a little bit.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. In the kind of Metroidvania fashion, you're doing a lot of platforming in Blasphemous, although it's simple platforming. There's only a few things that you're really doing with platforming. There is a kind of you can like hang on ledges, and there are lots of jumps where you're not going to be able to jump on top of the platform, but you'll be able to mantle up. Um, there are certain sections of the game where you're not doing a wall jump, but you can like stick your sword into a surface and just kind of like hang there, and then you can jump up and repeat to kind of climb up walls. And there's sections where you're dealing with strong wind that you can either you have to wait for the wind to die down or use it to your advantage to help you jump farther. But that's really the extent of the platforming. But I feel like you are doing platforming a lot. And this is another big criticism of the game that we've mentioned before, is there are a lot of instant death spikes in the game. And like, there's a lot of people I've talked to who like they like other parts of the game, but instant death spikes are like a huge demerit for them. So what do you think about them?
Definitely those ones, like the spikes sucked, but I kind of it's like you do it the one time, and then hopefully you don't do it again because like you said, the platforming's not terribly difficult, but it's definitely it kind of goes back to like older Castlevanias. But the ones that kind of got me were like the pitfalls because there was ones that were immediate death and
Mm-hmm.
some that like led to like a secret area or something. So it's like that one you kind of had to play a little bit of like gambling with, like 50-50 chance here, maybe I find something cool, maybe it's just death. And with a game that kind of has a a fairly substantial penalty on death, I guess, like the whole guilt meter thing.
All right. Yeah. Should have mentioned that when we were talking about what happens when you die. You don't lose your souls,
Yeah.
but your magic is handicapped. You'll lose a bit of your magic meter until you can visit a part to kind of like this is my Catholic ignorance here, but like you'll be absolved of your guilt, and then your magic meter will go back to full, kind of like how Dark Souls 2 does it with your health when you die. But in this game, it's your magic, which isn't as bad. But I agree, those pitfalls also suck. There's a Metroidvania upgrade you need to do that,
Yeah.
and you have to kind of puzzle out like a lot of the elevator shafts. You'll like ride an elevator up and you'll see something along the ride, and there's no way to get to it except to jump down. And if
Mhm.
you don't have that item, you'll just die straight up. But if you have the item, you can get down there.
And you got to kind of like look at the map, like is there something below me on the
Yeah,
map maybe.
exactly. Yep. Um, with that and the instant death spikes, I I didn't like fall in the spikes a whole bunch. Like I didn't. They're there, and like it's not, you're not doing like super complex platforming above rows of spikes a lot of times. The most the game will have you do is like jump and grab onto a ladder, and there are spikes below the ladder, you know. But what does kind of suck is that there are kind of long distances between checkpoints, and so you'll go through 6, 7, 8 rooms through a level. Something happens, you fall in the spikes, you die, and I would rather die fighting an enemy than just an instant death pit. There are a couple of like combat encounters where the doors lock, and then you're in a room that has like these pitfalls in it, and the floors crumble and stuff like that, and that kind of sucks to fall down those. But overall, this was like, sure, it's annoying to fall in a death pit, but it was not a you know it was not a fatal flaw for the game or anything even close to that. And like I said before, you get knockback when you get hit, but they programmed it in so that if you get hit next to an edge, it will usually not knock you off the edge and into those spikes, which is a nice thing to kind of take the take the sting away from that.
Like a game without like no double jump or like air dash or anything like that, to where you're like you see you're gonna mess up, you're like, oh shit, I'm about to fall on these spikes, and
Yeah.
you can have an active reaction to that. With this game not having any of that, you're kind of like you're you're relegated to your fate a little bit. You're like, well, fuck, I'm about to fall in this goddamn spike pit.
Yeah. There's some times where you have to jump and you have to jump and grab the ladder, and you'll miss the ladder, and then you'll fall for like 2 seconds. And you're like, oh well, I hope there's no spikes down there. Oh, yep, spikes. Okay, well. The last thing about Metroidvanias to mention is a good Metroidvania will have you go back and explore with your new abilities, and the exploring should give you nice treats, I think, in a good Metroidvania. So in Blasphemous, you'll find those rosary beads like we talked about before. Most of them give you passive buffs. You will get rosary knots to add to your rope to equip more beads. That's always cool to find. They're pretty rare, but it's really awesome to find one. You'll find new prayers, which are your magic spells, and you'll find items for side quests. And I think those are all good rewards. The problem with Blasphemous, though, is that this was a Kickstarter game, and so at least half of the things you find are going to be these bones. They'll say like, clavicle of, Diculus, and it's a kick. Yeah. it's a Kickstarter reward basically. And those, like, the lore descriptions of them are pretty cool, but like sometimes you'll go through a tough platforming thing and you'll figure out like some kind of light puzzly thing to get to an item, and then it's a bone and you're like, okay, fine. So it's not very satisfying a lot of times when you find those bones, but the other stuff that you find is cool.
Yeah, and I think eventually, like, and I don't think it was until their last DLC that the bones really even did anything. It was
Right.
purely lore and like a Kickstarter backer reward. So it'd been cooler if you'd like. There's the ones with the little babies and the lanterns. When
Right.
you hit those, and that does eventually lead to something with like a reward at
You
the
get a
end.
good reward for that too. So
Mhm.
when you see those little cherubs in the
Yeah,
glass cases, you should get those. I mean, they're cute. Get them out of those those glass boxes anyway. But there is a really good reward for. You don't have to get all of them. I think you maybe have to get like 2/3 of them. I think there's 38, and you need to get 15 or 20 of them to get the reward. I think
yeah, 20 if I
something like
remember
that.
right.
Yeah, and if you're just playing the game normally, you should get at least 20 of them because you'll just see them, and you just have to hit a magic spell to get a lot of them.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
easy.
It took me a minute to realize that, like, that the magic spells and your boomerang work to get those
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of
blood.
times you'll go into a room and there'll be one just like floating at the top of the screen. There's no way to get to it, so you got to use a spell that has some vertical reach to it. But yeah, those are cool. But yeah, exploration rewards range from very cool to the bones. But I guess like we can just say like part of one of the DLCs is if you collect enough of the bones, you'll get an extra boss fight.
Yeah.
And so you should collect the bones, and when you see an item, it's just a glowing sphere. You don't know what it is, so you'll probably pick them up anyway. So collecting the bones has like an end goal to it in one of the DLCs, which I think is smart by them. The first time I played it, it's literally just you're picking up Kickstarter rewards. That boss fight's really fucking hard though, so like it's not like I got this really fun thing out of it.
Yeah. And
Um, we can talk about the DLCs now. So
yeah.
what you gonna say something about that boss?
Well, that boss definitely it leads into, and I'll talk definitely more about it in the spoilers, but it's a it's a difficult boss, and but it leads, it's part of a quest line that leads to the like ending that came with the last DLC. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to do it to get that. So it's like collecting all the bones on top of beating a very hard boss that only gives you part of the quest item to complete this whole big long convoluted thing, which like I said I'll talk more about in the spoiler section, but uh, it's um it's yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good DLC. I think this last Wounds of Eventide, however you want to
Right.
pronounce that. And they're all free, so you can't really complain about free DLC.
Right. Yeah, they're free. So the Wounds of Eventide, which is the most recent DLC release, adds 2 extra bosses into the game and a new level. Um, so this is cool that they're giving you more bosses and a new level. However, I thought it was too hard, just straight up too difficult for me. I fought the one boss that you can fight after doing all the bones, and I feel like that boss has like 3 times the HP as the final boss. So like I just, and she hits really really hard. It just wasn't very fun. And same thing with that extra area.
Oh
I
god.
actually counted because I thought this was ridiculous. So my sword was fully upgraded. I went to that extra area, and the regular enemies in the area take 15 hits to kill each with a fully upgraded sword. And they can kill you in about 2 hits. And I
Mhm.
just thought it was way too hard. With the with the kind of movement and the defensive, abilities you have, one of the attacks that hits super hard you can't block. So yeah, I just thought it was too hard straight up. So I kind of tested it out a little bit, and then I was like, nope.
Yeah, and the reward, if you want to call it that, at the end of that is another boss fight
Yeah.
that was not too much spoiler, I guess, but visually cool, but not really that difficult.
Well, it's in the trailer for the
Yeah.
DLC, so we can say it's like a giant snake, right?
Mhm.
And so,
Yeah.
like, I saw that and I was like, I would love to fight a giant snake in Blasphemous, but the level leading up to it was too difficult. Um, I mean, I'm sure if I want to spend 2 hours trying to get to it, I could have, but I didn't want to use my time that way.
And that was kind of the disappointing part about it. Like I spent like an hour or something dying multiple times trying to just get to the fight, and then you get to the fight, and it was I think I one shot it,
Oh,
so it was not a hard fight.
gotcha. Yeah, yeah. Not a big fan. I mean, these are all like end game challenge things. So like, if you're the type of person who likes to do end game challenge stuff, then this could be cool for you. But like, that's not really my thing in any game, really. I mean, in Hollow Knight too. Like I said that in that episode, I didn't do most of the end game challenge stuff there. That's just not the kind of thing I like
That,
doing. So
you say it all the time, but that like the Pantheon thing in Hollow Knight is like straight sicko stuff because it's like not only does it make the bosses more challenging, but then you have to take on these like I can't even remember what they call them, but basically it's like, oh, your sword does half damage and they do double damage, and you can't
yeah.
do this and that. And it's like, come the fuck on.
Yep. There's another DLC called Strife and Ruin, which is a boss rush mode, or has a boss rush mode. I have never ever done a boss rush in a game. It's just not something that I think is interesting. But if you like that, here's a boss rush. There's also something in that DLC called Miriam's Challenges, which is the protagonist from Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, another Metroidvania game. She gets trapped in your world, and you have to do these platforming challenges. They are extremely hard, and the time limits are really tight. Like,
Yeah.
I did one of them. I thought I aced that challenge. Like, I thought I did it perfectly. Like, there's no way I could have done it better. And I got through with like literally half a second to spare. And that, like, so the next time I came up on one and I saw, like, okay, it's a harder platforming challenge, I remember how tight the time limit was on the last one. I'm just not doing this. That was, my decision.
Yeah, I did. I think I completed two and got to the third one, and just I was like, this is not worth my time. And um, I actually played that game and didn't actually get very far into it, so I don't
Hmm.
really know much about it. So maybe it's cool for fans. I guess that's kind of what it was, like a tie-in kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but as a DLC, I mean, I think this was, I don't know if this was their first one, and it was just something they kind of got out quick because the boss roast mode's pretty easy to add into a game. I think. I guess I don't know that for sure, but and then this was like a tie-in, and I just yeah,
Yeah.
I gave up, and maybe I just needed to get good, but I didn't feel like wasting the time.
Well, it's a major tie-in with like the Castlevania roots of Blasphemous, because the main creative force behind Bloodstained is Koji Igarashi, the guy who worked on a lot of those old Castlevania games. So
Yeah, he's like
it's
Symphony of the Night's like composer,
Symphony of
pretty
the
much.
Night and past, like the
Yeah,
Game Boy Advance ones and stuff like that, as far as I know. So it's another one where they're like, their inspirations. I'm sure it was very cool for them to have that in the game, but it didn't end up being very fun for me.
yeah,
The last DLC is called The Stir of Dawn, which added a new game plus, and it added like new content in the new game plus. Like you have to do a new game plus to see this new stuff. And I tried this on my second playthrough because I had already beaten the game, and I was like, oh, I'll just start that new game plus. But in my opinion, the new game plus is terrible in this game and like not fun in the slightest, because it's like you said, enemies hit twice as hard and you are twice as weak. And so like the basic dudes at the beginning of the game would take like over 10 hits each to kill, and they would kill you in 2 hits. Like just these, skeletons at the beginning of the game. And so I played this for maybe an hour or so, and I was like, this sucks. And I started a new game, and I was like, oh, holy shit, these guys die in 3 hits. Like they should. They're the the skeletons at the beginning of the game. So
fun
I
again.
I mean, I'm coming off like I'm actually, yeah, I'm pretty down on all of these DLCs. It's cool that it's there and it's cool that it's free, but the challenge areas in the Wounds of Eventide I thought were too hard for me personally. The new game plus is like ridiculously hard. I think it's basically for masters of the game, and the boss rush and stuff. I just don't like boss rushes. So there is stuff for people who like different things than me. I get that, just not for me.
Yeah, and like that Stir of Dawn added like these like additional penances you could do, and
Hmm.
if like they had maybe just kept it to those, like don't do the sponginess, don't do the extra damage, or take away the extra damage. There's like one that like turns your HP bar into just like orbs, so you can only do a certain amount of hits instead of like damage,
Hmm.
and like ones that make it to where you got to use the magic more because your sword's weak, or
Yeah.
ones that like I think there's one that even makes it to where enemies respawn every room like a traditional Castlevania. So like if you could do that instead of just spongy bosses and really weak sword hits, you would maybe have more I would maybe have more fun with it. I never even
Yeah.
tried it.
That would be a more interesting challenge than, each skeleton takes literally 30 seconds to fight, you know.
Mm.
That would be more interesting to me. So
Yeah.
cool. Well, let's take a little music break here. When we come back, Chris and I are going to give our final thoughts about Blasphemous and do we recommend and stuff like that. And we're back. So, final thoughts about Blasphemous. In summary, Chris, what do you want to say to the listeners about Blasphemous?
It's a definite yes for me because I'm a Metroidvania fan. I don't know if it's like essential play, like you gotta play this game. Like I would say, and I like I said, it's because it's the king of the modern Metroidvania. But
Yeah.
Hollow Knight is a must play.
Yeah.
Like even if you don't like Metroidvanias, you gotta play that game. It's amazing in all respects. This one might not land on that list squarely, but if you're a Metroidvania fan, it's a definite play. And I picked it up on the Switch for like less than $30. So, and with the free DLCs, like
Yeah.
if you think 20 hours or more, and if you're into stuff like boss rushes and like New Game Plus with additional bosses, I mean, you get your money's worth for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, I think at this point in time, it goes down to like $10 on sale on the Switch. So if you want to just throw it on your wish list and wait for that price, I think this is a really good game. And like, I played it through twice, and I wanted to talk about it on the show. The new game, like the base game and the all the stuff included in that, I think is pretty good. And the imagery and the music is, it sets up this really unique atmosphere that not many games, like I said before, not many games have as creative use of pixel art and stuff like that as Blasphemous. And I think that the difficulty of the main game, like it's tough, but it's tough in that way that like older games would require, or like a Souls game or Hollow Knight or something like that. Like you can't just like button mash your way through this game, but I don't think it's that hard if you take the time to learn, how the combat system really works and stuff like that. So I'm kind of the same as you. I would recommend this to people who like Metroidvanias, people who like Castlevania. Catholics, I would recommend this to Catholics as required reading as part of your religious studies. Um, and yeah, just a good game. Who doesn't have time for more good games with just like wild character designs and stuff like that? It's pretty good.
Yeah, and I don't. I mean, for a game that you die pretty substantial amount in, I never really found myself outside of like one instance where I'm like, I just got to put this down because
Yeah.
I'm gonna get mad if I don't.
Yeah, I
Like,
never hit a point where I was like, "Fuck this game, I'm done with this."
mhm.
Which a couple of Castlevania games have gotten me to that point. Yeah, a couple of Castlevania games were so frustrating at points that I just put them down and never played them again. Blasphemous never ever got to that point.
Said Super Metroid was like, that's like the holiest of holies, and you were kind of like, I'm done at about halfway point.
Yeah, I've said it several times, but I'm not the biggest fan of Super Metroid. And yet to me, it's not the holiest of holies. It was dethroned by lots of other games within the genre that I think are better. But this is not the Super Metroid podcast. You can wait to listen for more of my Metroid thoughts when I cover Metroid Dread here in the near future. So, yeah. Let's do a little housekeeping before spoiler time. So, if you are going to tap out and play Blasphemous, or if you just don't want spoilers, thank you for listening. And if you would like to support Tales from the Backlog, the best thing to do is to subscribe and leave ratings and reviews. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, and Podcast Addict, I think, has ratings, and Spotify. And if your platform allows it, please leave a rating for Tales from the Backlog. I also do another show. It is called A Top 3 Podcast. Chris was a guest on one of those episodes. We talked about top 3 bands or musicians that you slept on, and that was a really fun episode. So go check that out. And we have lots and lots of other topics too. So if you would like to hear more of me, check out A Top 3 Podcast. Also, get into the Tales from the Backlog social media pages. Links are in the episode description. Feel free to talk to me about Blasphemous, share your favorite screenshots from Blasphemous, um, we can talk about how wild this stuff is. And if you had a good experience with some of those things that I was not so happy about, like the DLCs and stuff like that, or New Game Plus, tell me about it. I would like to hear other opinions about that stuff. So for now, we are going to take a little break. And when we come back, it's spoiler talk for Blasphemous. I am back with Chris Nelson talking about spoilers for Blasphemous, and we're going to talk about the things that I kind of take from these games when I play them, specifically talking about the bosses and then like what kind of ending we got, because there are multiple endings in the game. So I'll just turn it over to you first to give one of your favorite bosses.
So, I guess the one that comes to mind is I have no idea how to pronounce this. Kurais, Quirce. He's
Kirse.
the Kirse. There you go.
Yeah.
He's like this fire man that lives in a prison, and I think it reminded me of like Mega Man boss fights. And I know you've kind of mentioned before in the past that you're not a big Mega Man guy, but like
I am not.
you got a small rectangular room. The boss kind of teleports around and attacks you from the walls, and like you just got to kind of learn the pattern and then rinse and repeat a little bit.
Yeah.
So it definitely kind of went back to that like fight style, the Mega Man, and I grew up playing like Mega Man X and that kind of stuff. So
yeah, that boss was like maybe more so than a lot of the bosses in Blasphemous. That boss was just like a fucking video game boss, you know? Like some of the bosses in the game are like really good like dual styles, or like, you know, fight a big monster type bosses. And this one was just like you said, I think Mega Man's a good comparison for this guy. Just a video game boss. But really fun to learn the patterns, for sure.
yeah, the way that kind of lands too is like it is basically like you get to the end of the prison level and you get boss, where some of the other ones feel a little bit more kind of integrated into the world.
Yeah, I was never quite sure when I was going to get a boss. Like, it was always kind of a surprise when I found a boss room. But yeah, this one, because if I remember right, you go through the prison level, you go through like a couple different screens that you're going through those doors through, and then you'll find one that kind of looks like it's the last one. Actually, that boss, you see an item, and when you go to jump for it, the floor collapses and you fall down into the boss room. But
it's
it is
like,
after kind of like a final stretch looking thing.
yeah, you've cleared out most of the rest of the map, and you're like, well, this is the last place I can go on the map from what I can see.
Yeah.
And then you just fall down into a pit, and he's down there shooting fire at your face.
Yep. Yeah, that was fun. One of my favorite bosses is called Our Lady of the Charred Visage. And this is, oh man, the first time I saw this, if you're listening to this and you haven't played the game or you forgot, she is the floating head with the section of exposed brain in her forehead. And yeah, as soon as you see that, you're like, oh, smack the brain. Of course, that's how I'm going to kill this boss. And this is go ahead, dude.
And like her, it's like a burnt face. Like,
yeah.
And like, there's some lore you get a little bit like where it's the visage of some lady who poured hot oil over her face because she was too beautiful. It's like, Jesus, that's intense.
Yeah, it's real fucked up. You got to take that oil after you beat her back to this dude who's frozen in a tree, or it's a tree who this dude who's been transformed into a tree that's frozen, and you have to let him pour the hot oil on himself
Yeah.
after you're done.
Yeah. That's like a
But
whole thing. The trees and the people and the yeah.
yeah, that boss was pretty fun though. It's more of a dodge the projectile type fight. It starts out as one of those like floating head and two hands, which is common for like a 2D action game. But you're not actually like the hands aren't like swatting at you like they do in one of the bosses in The Messenger, which is another game that I've covered on the show before. This one, they're shooting projectiles, and this is the boss fight that teaches you that you can smack some of the glowing white and red projectiles. And all of my training from Ocarina of Time and the Ganondorf fight came in handy here. And then you can use this in the final boss fight if you remember what those projectiles look like.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then another interesting one was, and it's another one that I can't pronounce. Mequedius? Mequedius?
Melquiades, I guess.
Yeah, I'm worse at Spanish than you, I guess. But he's Skeleton Pope, is what I called him.
The skeleton. He's it's the one where he's a skeleton and he's being held up by these extremely hairy arms.
Yeah.
Like they're
It's like Wolfman style hairy arm.
They put a lot of like detail into the hair on those arms too, like the pixel art. It's pretty gross. As someone with hairy arms myself, it's kind of gross. But I like how you fight that boss. You have to smack the arms because you can't hurt the Pope. He's too high up. So you have to hit the arms until they fall and they'll drop him. And then you can go smack the Skeleton Pope. I died a lot in that fight. In my replay, that was probably the hardest boss in the game for me.
Oh, really? I think
because he has this move where he has like that scepter and he stabs down with it, and it's really quick. So like it punishes you for trying to get greedy hitting the arms. Like if you try to get one too many, you're thinking to yourself like, I can probably get a couple more swings. No, you can't. He's going to smack you.
And there's not a lot of wind up to that. Like it just kind of happens.
Yep. Like, so you got to learn like, okay, arms, smack, smack. Okay, block. Get ready for that. It's coming.
And I guess probably like the symbolism there is kind of interesting. Like the concept, like the Pope is held up and untouchable until you like take his like procession out.
Yeah, something like that.
So
yeah,
I just cool. Loved all around cool.
Oh, dude, it goes without saying. Any people listening, like it goes without saying. If we're talking about a boss, just assume that the design is really fucking cool. Yeah,
that's like the snake. The snake is like awesome, and like I think it's Serapis, which is probably Spanish for serpent. I would assume.
Yeah, I would assume. Yeah.
But he's like you can see that his whole body isn't even like you're standing on his body to fight him, and in the background his body's like curled around the mast of this giant ship. So you just gotta assume he's freaking enormous. Yeah. And he takes up most of the screen when you're fighting him. But it wasn't a very difficult fight. Like especially if you did it after playing through the whole game, you kind of know the tricks and when to do things. So he's not very hard.
Yeah. One of my other favorite bosses is Chrysanta, which is the second to last boss. I think this is the best like boss fight in the game. It's not the best design, but it's the most challenging. This is more of your final test. Actually, this is testing your melee combat abilities. Like your blocking and stuff like that. This is testing like, do you actually get this before you can go fight the last boss? If you can parry, you can block every one of her attacks except for this. I think she has a lightning attack that you can't block, but it's not that hard to, dodge. If you're very good at parrying, this fight's not that hard. If you're okay at parrying, this is really hard. So my first playthrough, this I probably fought her like 20 times before I beat her. My second playthrough, I beat her the second try because I remembered like parry everything, learn her attacks. She can parry you, which is cool, but then you can parry her counterattack and then you can get your attack in. So like it's not, it doesn't, it doesn't end up being that hard if you remember how to parry.
Yeah, and I mean, it is it's a cool like scene. You're like on the rooftops. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like it feels like the last boss, and
Yeah.
honestly, in my opinion, it is the kind of ultimate test of probably like I said more your combat acumen for the game
The final
because
boss is your test of like projectile bullet hell
yeah
stuff, but
yeah
she's you've been doing melee combat basically the entire game, and Chrysanta is the real test with that stuff.
yeah and
Yeah,
we'll talk about it a little bit in the endings, but Chrysanta kind of becomes a major player for someone that through most of the game you don't like ever run into her. Like that's the time
yeah,
you run into her.
yeah. She's the she's like the final protector of the miracle. She's there to try to stop you from going in and fucking shit up. And then yeah, I any of the endings and stuff that involve her I didn't see, so we'll have to chat about that.
hmm
Um, Before we do though, what do you think of the final boss when you fight the um, I forget his name, is Escribar? Is that the
Yeah,
baby or is that the final boss?
no, Escribar's the baby. Escribar, the last son or whatever, last son of the miracle, I think is like
Mm-hmm.
his title, and he's like he's not skeleton pope, he's real pope.
Right, right. So the final boss starts out with a fight against a dude throwing magic at you. He's really easy, I think, but it's just the first phase of the fight. The second phase is where, as you've been collecting these masks in the second half of the game, um, should have meant that, oh man, this is just a constant theme throughout the show. Things I should have mentioned before the spoiler wall, but there are two halves of the game and they're both non-linear within those halves. So you do the first three bosses in any order you want, then you can get through a door, and then you can do the next set in any order you want. Um, as you're doing those next sets, this kind of face door is opening slowly as you do it, and it's revealing this like very unsettling, like raw flesh looking face that's inside of it, and that's the final boss.
From what I can tell, doesn't have eyelids because his eyes are just kind of always like bugging out.
Yeah, yeah, that's
But
the final boss. It's real gross.
yeah,
um but this is like a bullet hell
hmm
final test, and you'll get those projectiles from the Our Lady of the Charred Visage fight that you can smack back at it. And this is one of those fights where you have to avoid the attacks. There's a sword floating around on the screen. You have to smack the sword. Once you do that, the doors will open and you can damage the actual boss. But what sucks is there's platforms on the screen that disappear at certain intervals. And sometimes it's just really hard to get up to the boss to hit him. Or you'll get up and you'll smack him two times, and then the platform you're on will disappear. I still beat
yeah,
this my second try each playthrough. And I've heard some people say that this boss in particular is like frustratingly hard, and I did not have that experience. He doesn't have a ton of health if you
mm
have your sword upgraded all the way.
yeah.
Yeah.
It it's it's definitely like I said, the biggest challenge of it is the whole platforming aspect because you have to, like I said, you have to hit the sword and then you have to get up there. And then we talked about that technique earlier where you can kind of like get multiple hits in the air, and that's
Yeah.
where it can kind of come in handy. But even then, still, like half the time, I couldn't get that down, and you get like 1-2 hits, and then you gotta rinse repeat, and it's if anything, it takes a little bit of time, but I don't
Hmm.
know if I was ever felt particularly challenged by it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's because like the sword flying around is really easy to avoid, and then it'll throw attacks of like the four elements at you, but they're not that hard to dodge. Some of them you can hit away with your sword. Some of them will like fill up 2/3 of the screen, but it's the same 2/3 of the screen every time. So like once you get hit by it once, you shouldn't ever get hit by it again. It's just not that tough. It's just I found it just more annoying because like the face door will be open and there are like sometimes like no platforms to let me jump up to it. So that's one that calling beams from heaven lightning spell would really help to
Hmm.
do some damage. So yeah, not a great final boss though. Like the first phase of it, when you just like you fight this like super elderly like pope looking dude and you just wreck his shit, was kind of cool.
Yeah, you kind of just go in there and like kick the crap out of him, and
Yeah.
I think even because in the and we're kind of getting close to that, but in the Wounds of Eventide DLC, there's actually a third phase, and if you
Okay.
die during that, you go back. If I'm not mistaken, or maybe I did die once on the second phase, and you have to fight him as the little tiny Pope
Hmm.
again. And I felt like it was even easier the second time. Like they were like, okay, yeah, you know what you're getting to. So you just
That's
like
good.
hit him twice, and
That's
it's like get back into the regular fight.
Yeah, that's good because that's a super annoying thing a lot of games do with multi-phase boss fights. Thinking about like the last boss of Sekiro, when you have to fight Genichiro every single time, and he's a total pushover, but you have to do it every time before you fight like the really hard final boss, and it gets super annoying. So that's good. I'm glad they kind of recognize like, hey, you proved that you can do this. Just get back to the real part.
Hit him twice and get to the part that you lost, and
Yeah.
try again.
Exactly. So, what's that third phase like of in the Wounds of Eventide?
It's kind of a side scrolling style fight where he's still a big red weirdo, but he's like God now, and he's got flowy gray hair, and he's still kind of just it's side scrolling, and he's kind of just floating around, chucking projectiles at you, and you're just kind of jumping up and hitting him. Honestly, it wasn't very difficult. I think I beat it second try, and the uh, the reason was that I fell off one of the edges because it's a
Hmm.
like side kind of scrolling like style fight, and then basically after that it's all um, just like cutscene. So
Okay,
he even after third phase, you don't it doesn't like kick it up a notch. Honestly, in my opinion, it's just a different style of boss fight, but not anything difficult.
that's kind of cool. I wouldn't be mad at that if like the third phase isn't this insane challenge because you have to do those other phases beforehand. That's not bad. Yeah. So after you beat the final boss, you basically go straight to your ending. And both times I played, I got the bad ending, which is called the sink into ash ending, where, well, it is what it sounds like it is. You beat the final boss, you start to walk up this mountain of ash, and there's something up at the top of it, um,
Down.
a throne.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
his the
That's
main
what
the
I
Pope
thought.
throne.
The Pope's throne, right. So you're walking up there, but you sink into the ash and you die. And Deo Gracias comes and he takes your helmet away and puts it in the pile of, thousands of other helmets just like it. So I think that ending is like thematically cool. I think that's cool. And like I said at the beginning, the pile of the thousands of penitent ones who tried before you, I like that. That's cool. But that's considered the bad ending because well, you sunk into ash and died. You didn't get all the way to the throne. Um, did you get this ending, or which one did you get?
I did the the Wounds of Eventide, which I don't know what the ending, if it has a name, it probably does, and I just don't know it.
Uh-huh.
But um, you have to do a whole convoluted set of things. You have to beat we talked about that boss behind the bone, like in the
In the ossuary, yeah.
yeah, in the ossuary, who's very difficult, like
Mm-hmm.
kind of on par with Chrysanta, um, but also does kind of the bullet hell stuff. And you mentioned that you tried it and it was hard, and that was I took like it was a 15 plus try. So you have to like beat her, beat the snake guy. You have to find a tomb, and you don't fight as Estradas, the little dude with the hammer that blocks the door.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah,
you don't fight.
I did that. So I fought him my first playthrough.
Mm,
But then my second playthrough I was trying for the Wounds of Eventide stuff, so I didn't fight
mm,
him the second time either. I don't remember that fight being special. After you go through that door, you fight dudes with these big, hammer looking things, and that's basically what that fight was basically one of those guys with probably some extra spells or something like that.
yeah. Okay, so kind of got off track there, but so you get to the ending, and you basically you make it to the top of the Ashen Tower, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's how the other good ending goes. But
Yeah.
in this case, you like ascend into heaven. I think they call it the other side of the dream,
Okay.
which and you you get there and you fight this, the space pope, but he's red and floating, and he has four arms,
Hell yeah.
and
I'm in. Space Pope who's red and floating with four arms. Tell me, like, say no more. I'm in.
there. Uh, but so you you beat him, and then you basically meet the High Wells. You meet God, and then God tells you you shouldn't be here. This is the ultimate sin. Your name will be forgotten forever. Go fuck yourself.
Hell yeah.
And
That's Catholicism 101 right there, right?
right, but then Santa shows up, and she basically says, "Yo, let's kill God."
Hell yeah.
And you
So
and you
Blasphemous is a JRPG. That's what you're saying.
yeah, yeah, basically, it's everything you've ever made. So you kill God, and you free the. I don't know. We might mention it a little bit, maybe not. The the first miracle, the kid who asked to be punished and he turned into a tree.
Yeah, yeah.
So you free him, and then your Maya culpa, the sword, like disintegrates.
Okay.
I think that means it's the end of your penance, or the penitent one's penance. So
Sure.
then he dies, and Dio Gracias and Chrysanta put him in a stone tomb in the middle of a desert,
Sure.
and
As you do.
pray, pray over him, and then, dude, it gets weirder. I swear to God, it does. They pray over him, and so I guess the penitent one's dead, and then I can't remember if the credits roll, and then this happens, but the the last like scene is this giant semi-translucent heart descends from the sky. And I swear to God, it sounds like I'm making this up, but you can watch it. And
Yeah.
there's like sinew connecting it up to the sky, and inside of that is a full-grown man, but like a giant one, like tucked up in the fetal position over what I'm assuming is Custonia, and then it just cuts to black.
Okay. So, all right.
I know it sounds like I just had a fever dream.
Yeah, this is this is like the best psychedelics mixed with an ambient dream all at the same time. This is good. Um yes, all right. I'll have to go watch that on YouTube because that sounds fucking wild. Um
It is
yeah.
weird as shit.
In the regular game, so the good ending of the base game kind of starts out the same. And I guess the way you get this is you have to do all the optional dungeons, and you find these thorns as rewards or something throughout the game. You have to upgrade, or there's one thorn that you upgrade. Sorry. And I didn't do this. I didn't find a single way to upgrade the thorn in my normal playstyle, so I didn't do this. And I checked on Wikipedia for how to get the good ending, and it said upgrade the thorn, and I was like, oh, okay. I don't know what that means. I don't know how to do that. So I guess I'll never get the good ending. But like you looked up how to do that, how to upgrade the thorn.
I luckily found like a Steam like forum
Okay.
where someone had basically wrote it out, and it has to do with, you talk about those dungeons. There's those statues that you have to like, that can relieve your guilt or whatever.
Right.
And I think they're supposed to be of Escribar, and dude, it's so, there's no way you would be able to figure this out. Somebody did, obviously, but I don't
Yeah.
feel like anyone else did. You have to destroy those and then, well, you have to have a rosary item that you get, and then you have to die like 3 times while wearing it, and then it
Mm-hmm.
becomes tainted by sin. So then you destroy the statues while wearing that. You go into these like basically waves of enemy dungeons. So you're just in a
Mm-hmm.
room, waves of enemies.
And then you have to beat all of those.
You have to destroy like, there's like 8 or 9 of them
Okay.
throughout the map,
All right.
and then
So
I think that gives you the good ending, and that's
yeah.
also part of the eventide ending. You have to do that as well.
Okay. Well, I 100% never would have figured that out. And so we'll put Blasphemous on the pile of games where, in order to get the quote unquote good ending, you have to do some obtuse shit that a normal player would never think to do or even find if they had the idea to do it. So
Yeah,
throw
it's
this one
weird
on the
because
pile.
it's an interactable I can't speak, item that like has a purpose in the game. So what made me think I should destroy that thing?
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
where's that thought process?
Or like I never even thought that I could destroy that because I'm in that room. There's no enemies. Why would I be swinging my sword? You know?
Exactly. There's an X
So
button to like pray at it and get your guilt forgiven, and then you
yeah.
fucking leave the room. That's how you normal people play games.
Speaking of those guilt statues, I just thought of another classic. Take a drink every time Dave says, should have said this before the spoiler wall, but uh, when you die, you leave your like kind of a ghost version of yourself, and you have to go pick that up, and that will relieve your guilt. But one thing I thought was cool was that also gives you a heal when you do that. So like that was part of my boss strategy. If I died, I would like not pick that up right away and save it for when I need a quick heal, run over and grab that. Was kind of cool.
I
So
don't think I ever did that, but I do know, like, yeah, you like got your full health back for the most part, right?
yeah, it's either a full heal or it's a big one. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was part of my strategy. The good ending for the game, which again I looked this up on a wiki, is so you upgraded your thorn all the way. You have done those optional dungeons. You beat the final boss. You go up the mountain of ash, and you sit on the throne. You take the mea culpa, the sword, and the penitent one stabs himself, which is cool, just like the woman at the beginning of the game. And you are kind of worshipped by the people of Sistodia as the new pope, basically the new father of the miracle or last son of the miracle, the new father, yada yada yada. After the credits, there's a scene where Chrysanta comes and she takes the mea culpa out from the penitent one's body, which seems to me like it could set up, Blasphemous 2, where you play as Chrysanta, similar to, oh, fuck, I had a game in my head where this Hollow Knight, where you're playing as a different character, someone who works with you in alternate endings to, do the deed. So yeah, that could be a cool thing to play as, like, if they decide to make Blasphemous 2, which I think has actually been confirmed that they are doing that.
And
Would be cool if you play as Chrysanta.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's confirmed or not, but it definitely seems like the good ending in the original game, and even the convoluted ending in Wounds of Eventide sets it up to where Chrysanta is the main character in the next game, because
Yeah.
in the original one she basically like takes the Maya culpa out and says, "You're going to be forgotten, and I'll be the one to be the next, you know, person that takes out the miracle or whatever." And then even in the one where she kind of turns against the miracle, she's the one, putting you to rest and like setting it up to be the good guy in the next one.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That would be cool, or if it's not Chrysanta, I have faith in this studio. They'll come up with something cool, you know. Um,
Yeah.
at this point, Blasphemous 2 will probably be like a, if not like a day one buy, like well, if not a day one buy, definitely like pretty soon after it comes out. Because I can't wait to see what this studio comes up with for a sequel. Because it just the ideas at work in this game, Blasphemous, are insane.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely on my radar now. Like, well, we were talking about like Silk Song, the Hollow Knight sequel, which
Yeah.
Lord knows when that's going to come out. If like if it's not out, I think Blasphemous 2 is maybe slotted for 2023. So if
Yep.
Silk Song's not out before 2023, this will be one that I pick up right away if I'm
Yeah.
not like already playing Silk Song or something.
Yeah, I find it really hard to believe that Blasphemous 2 won't also be really cool. Even if they don't do a lot to change the gameplay, I would play the same game with different character designs and stuff like that. Like I'm here for that kind of stuff. So I'm excited about that.
They've also pretty much proven that they can take a game that came out in 2019 and people were like, "Yeah, it's all right, but it could use some improvements." And then
Hmm.
they did it and it was
Yeah.
good. So they've kind of proven they can almost already do a sequel.
Yeah, for sure. So I am excited about that. I'll definitely be watching for like more information, release date, and kind of story setup for Blasphemous 2, but I'm excited about it. So
Definitely.
cool. Well, let's wrap this one up. Chris, thanks for coming on, dude. It's been a blast talking about Blasphemous with you.
Blasphemous, that's a good one.
That was not intentional. I think I'm okay at this, but I'm not I'm not that good, not yet.
Oh, it's awesome being back on, and like I said, I definitely I love talking video games with people, especially ones that like maybe don't touch me in a way that like some of the more nostalgia games of the past, but definitely left an impact on me for sure.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, like I don't think Blasphemous is a game that's like, it's not it's not changing the way I think about video games other than having just the coolest character designs ever. But it is a fun game, and it's good to talk about this stuff and talk about gameplay stuff that this game does that's pretty unique, or ways that they've kind of worked on existing formulas before. So yeah, good conversation. Thanks again for coming on, and everyone else, stay tuned for the next game that comes out of the backlog. See you next time.
Check me out.